Hello and welcome to another episode of the AAIM High Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Shin, and today's guest is Nancy Pak. Nancy Pak is a C-level executive known for scaling businesses and leading high-performance teams. She's an expert in consumer packaged goods and helping build lasting brands. Ms. Pak has held several CEO positions at companies such as Tate's Bake Shop, Tom's of Maine, and Walden Local Meat Company. She was the president of North American Ventures for Mondelēz International, a food company that produces snacks like Oreos, Sour Patch Kids, Ritz, and Cliff Bars. Now she serves as board chair for Daily Crunch Snacks. Please welcome Ms. Pak to the AAIM High Podcast. For the first part of the podcast, we will talk about your childhood and upbringing. Because this podcast is centered around being an Asian American leader in business, it is important to first understand each guest's childhood and upbringing as an Asian American. Ideas instilled within you from your parents and environment may have helped you become successful in where you are today. So could you please explain your childhood situation growing up, where, siblings, and what were family dynamics like?
Sure, thank you. And Ben, thank you for having me. This is a real honor to be with you today.
Thank you.
So my childhood, my sister, who's 4 years younger, and I grew up outside of New York City. We were born in California, but by the time I was 6 and she was 2, we moved to an area outside of the city called Bayside in Queens. We lived very, very modestly throughout our childhood. Really, that shifted as we were becoming teenagers and young adults. So we lived with my mother and my father. They're both Korean who immigrated to the U.S. when they were in their college years. So they came to the U.S. for college education. And we lived, the four of us in several different rental apartments. My father was, a small business owner. My mother was really taking care of my sister and I full time. And we just, lived very, very modestly. It was a really interesting set of family dynamics because my father and mother, they learned English as they came to the U.S. And they were, somewhat, my father in particular was somewhat traditional in various ways. And my sister and I, we saw ourselves more as whatever American meant. We weren't necessarily viewing ourselves as, Asian people or Asian kids. So quite the dichotomy or quite the, line of tension at times in the family.
Yeah, and how did your parents' experiences as immigrants to the U.S. influence your perspective on work and especially success?
Yeah, I just remember, in those, really early years, but through childhood, my father would travel to Korea from New York quite often. He was a business owner and had to go to Korea for different reasons, including visiting some of his suppliers. And he was gone for long periods of time, which made it really, there was a lot of pressure on my mother to make sure my sister and I were getting our homework done, making sure that we're having a good school experience. But his being away, that distance was not easy to manage. So it influenced my childhood in the sense of we really had to make sure we helped our mother as much as possible. If it was some odd jobs that we had to pick up, that's what we needed to do. But that dynamic of not being together every day all the time, made me think about, wow, Dad's making such a sacrifice and is putting in, so much extra effort and energy to manage his business, but by traveling far distances back and forth, it said to me he's making a big sacrifice and how much he cared about us to make such a sacrifice.
And did you ever feel any pressure to conform to certain expectations, either from your family or maybe the broader community, like at school? And how did you handle that?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned a little while ago, I remember I felt or viewed that I was American, not necessarily Asian, and not that you could be, both at the same time. But my father had, as I mentioned, he was very traditional. He expected or wanted me to learn Korean language, go on the weekends to, Korean school to learn language, maybe to, do some additional homework or learn lessons in math and science. He wanted, me to learn Korean and speak Korean in the household,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just, be really proud and be very visibly celebrating the fact that, that I'm a Korean daughter of, immigrant parents.
Mm-hmm.
And that I rebelled against that, to be honest with you. I wore, you know, Benetton. I don't even know if these brands exist anymore, but I wore Esprit. I wore Benetton, very bright clothing, um, and I honestly, and to this day, I've never learned Korean language. I have regretted it, and I do plan
Mm-hmm.
to learn it. But that sense of, conforming to learn the language, study hard,
Mm-hmm.
don't have extracurricular activities because academics are number one. Like those are some, heavy expectations, but
Yeah.
that was a major pressure growing up.
Yeah, and were there any specific experiences, events, or lessons learned during your childhood that you believe set some foundation for your future success?
Yeah, Ben, I had, sort of in the late teen years, both my parents passed away when I was still in college, about 10 months apart.
Mm.
And that was, just as I'm not quite exiting college and becoming a, self-sufficient adult. Um, that was, profoundly very challenging. They had
Mm-hmm.
been ill for, for years. It wasn't a sudden passing, but that instilled in me the importance of, it was important that I was going to get a good full-time job, that I needed to be self-sufficient, that I needed to look after my sister, and that we really didn't have a choice. I felt like I had to get out in the world and get that first job or set of experiences
Mm-hmm.
because, I had to rely on myself to take care of myself and my sister. And it taught me, right, to grow up pretty quickly, but it taught me the importance of a sense of duty,
Mm-hmm.
work ethic, and, focus and determination.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry for your loss. For the next question, I was wondering, is there anything that your parents, either like advice that they gave you that really stuck with you to like still where you are today?
Yeah, both my parents really, appreciated and endorsed a sense of respect and honor, and
Mm-hmm.
also, that sheer sense of commitment and perseverance. So, honor and respect is about appreciating your elders. So for, my sister and I to appreciate the sacrifices that my parents have made, and even, beyond that, so their parents and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the fact that my father had reinforced the importance of academics, I'm not sure I appreciated that at the time that I was growing up. I thought it was a little bit too rigid, it was very strict. But
Mm-hmm.
honestly, they both, because they instilled the importance and reinforced the importance of a good education and studying hard,
Mm-hmm.
that definitely led and shaped how I thought about the future of, that sense of rigor,
Mm-hmm.
commitment, perseverance that has really carried me, all the way to present times. But absolutely that sense. At the time, I was not somebody that practiced or participated in sports. I was, in a chorus. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm just studying and studying and studying. And sometimes it felt really onerous, but I did appreciate later on that that led me to be, studious, and appreciate the value of hard work.
Yeah, and that is definitely a theme amongst the people I interviewed of just the importance on education and like working hard throughout your childhood.
Yes.
And then for the last question about your childhood and upbringing, was there like a set moment in your childhood that shaped your ambitions or career path, even if you didn't realize it at the time?
Yeah, I think it's probably tied back to my parents passing, is just that moment, where I realized, like, it's time to be self-sufficient and, really step into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
And that you can certainly, enjoy your free time, enjoy time with your friends, but that real sense of duty and, not, hey, you're not sure what you want to do, and you can sort of take some time to, maybe you're going to take a gap year or something like that. I didn't feel I had that choice. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
again, those early years and their passing really did shape a lot of who I was going to become and who I am today.
And as we move on to the education and early career part of the podcast, what was your college experience like? And did you know what you wanted to pursue as a career in college?
Yeah, so Ben, college is where I discovered that I was Asian and I was really proud to be Asian. So if my before college years were, that a little bit of defiance and a little bit of, push pull on being Korean and being Asian and being Korean in particular, college is the place where I had my very first set of Asian friends. I grew up in a neighborhood that was, mostly Jewish families, no Asians, really very few, folks from different cultures and ethnicities. And so I get to college and it was such an international environment. And I was so pleased to meet other Asians, many of whom were, their parents had come to the U.S. about the same time, maybe it was college age. And so to find people that had my background, many, they were Korean, they're Chinese, they're, Vietnamese, they're Japanese, like so many different Asian cultures. And it's where I really discovered that I was Asian and I was really proud of it because there were activities and events that celebrate Asian heritage. Going to school in New York City, there's just a lot of parts of the city. There's Koreatown and there's Chinatown and there's just so many places where you can appreciate and celebrate that you are Asian. And so I describe my college years as transformative. It was some of the most transformative years of my entire life, just shaping my education, but also really realizing and appreciating that I'm Korean. I thought as I went through college, because I was majoring in political science, that I thought that I was going to go to law school right after college and become a lawyer, and that did not happen, but that's what I thought at the time when I was in college. That's what I thought I was destined to do.
And then how did you find what you did want to pursue as a career?
So right after college, I made the decision not to go directly to law school. Many of my friends did. It was not uncommon to do so. Some folks went on the path of, investment banking. Others went into other financial services or consulting. And then a very large group of people I knew were going to go into law school, become lawyers. So what I did do instead of going directly to law school was to work in a law firm as a paralegal for 2 years. And I learned a lot, and I so admired the work that, several of the partners that I worked for. I learned a lot. They taught me a lot about the law. But I think because my father was a small business owner, I had this sense of, I think there's something in the world of business that I feel like I'd be really good at. And I wasn't sure what type of lawyer I would be. I didn't even know what area of law I wanted to pursue. So I just started to think about it. And instead of going to law school after those 2 years of being a paralegal, I went to a very small ad agency. It doesn't exist anymore, but I did a lot of creative writing at the agency. And I was placing, ads. I said, oh my goodness, this is so creative. This is really fun. I want to do something at the intersection of creativity and sort of traditional business. So that's where I decided to apply to go to business school. I researched all the different schools that I could go to. And through a lot of networking and talking to different folks that graduated from the business school that I went to, I said, I want to go into consumer product goods. I want to go into marketing. And I'm so glad I chose that path. But it was really that discovery of, learning about the law, but then also thinking about my father's small business experience and then leading that way and, really through a lot of reflection and networking and talking to people about what brand management and marketing and consumer product goods were about. I said, ooh, I want to do that. That looks fun.
Yeah. So then how did you end up at Colgate and getting that job?
So I went to business school for 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and in that period of time, and knowing that the school did have a really good recruitment rate for, for companies coming to campus and
Mm-hmm.
recruiting people to go into consumer product goods, whether it be Colgate-Palmolive, Kraft Foods, Procter and Gamble, they would come to campus and recruit.
Mm-hmm.
I was specifically pursuing those opportunities.
Yeah.
So it's really through networking, homework, research, speaking to folks that were working in consumer product goods companies that I
Yeah.
said that is exactly what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Colgate came to campus. This was an interesting pivotal moment. Colgate came to campus. I interviewed. I got all the way to final rounds, and I did
Mm-hmm.
not get the, didn't I did not get the full-time role, and I
Mm.
was really disappointed. I did end up getting a role at American Home Products. Now it's gone through different permutations, but it was owned by a parent company that made, Advil and some other big brands. This was a food
Mm.
division of that parent company, and so that was my first marketing job. That food division ended up getting bought, and so when they announced that they were, going to be acquired, I
Mm-hmm.
said, "Ooh, this does not sound like job security."
Yeah.
And so Colgate, reached out and said, "We have an opportunity. Would you like to be considered?" I was
Mm-hmm.
thrilled. I really wanted to work for Colgate, and that's how that opportunity, less than a year after graduating from business school, is where Colgate found me, and so thrilled to join them.
Yeah, and because you were at Colgate for almost 24 years, you must have held several different roles. So can you walk us through your career progression there and how your role changed over time?
Sure. It was, Ben, it was so interesting because, as you mentioned, it's one place for 24 years, but had several phases of my career, several phases of those 24 years. So at first I spent, I would say 12, let me think, I spent 12 years in the domestic side of Colgate. So I was working on different brands focused on the US market.
Mm.
So I worked on toothpaste, I worked on the toothbrush business, I worked on deodorant, but everything that was focused on marketing and sales in the US.
Mm.
As part of Colgate's, the appeal of their career track, they offered several international assignments where you can go abroad. You can live abroad and work for Colgate abroad,
Mm-hmm.
but you had to be internationally mobile, and
Mm.
you also, you had to be doing well in your job. So I knew that I wanted to live and work abroad, and I worked really hard in all of my U.S. assignments so that I could be considered for the international track. I networked with people
Mm-hmm.
in the company to make sure they knew that I was really interested in going abroad. And so from that U.S. domestic experience, I had this amazing opportunity. I was asked to go to Thailand. My young family and I went to Bangkok. We lived there for 4 years. I traveled
Mm.
all through Asia. I mean, almost every country you can name and imagine.
Yeah.
Working with local marketing teams, I was really supporting and working with different marketing teams with their advertising campaigns, with their digital campaigns, and it was amazing. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
traveled, and from that experience, we then went to Warsaw, Poland, and we
Mm.
spent almost 3 years there. Completely different business, completely different set of marketplace conditions. And I would say those 7 years, Ben, I know I say this about my years at Columbia College,
Yeah.
these were transformative from a career standpoint. It is when I
Mm.
was abroad that it struck me that I wanted to go beyond the marketing function. And
Mm-hmm.
I realized that I wanted to run businesses. I wanted to have full financial responsibility. I wanted to have responsibility for marketing, for sales, for HR, for
Mm-hmm.
driving profits, for manufacturing. And it's through a couple of different managers that I had. I watched them and said, "That's an amazing, experience to run a business."
Hmm.
and go beyond the marketing training that I had, but to run businesses. So, the years in the US, so to marketing in the US market, going internationally for 7 years. And that's really what led me to coming back to the US and having the opportunity to, be CEO or CEO equivalent of Tom's of Maine, which is owned by Colgate.
Hmm. And when you were at Colgate, when you were in Bangkok, what was like your favorite project or initiative that you might have led there?
So there was a new product launch that was breakthrough technology, and we needed every country in Asia to bring this product to market in the most successful way. So I actually had to
Mm.
write sort of the marketing plan and what they called at the time a bundle book. So almost a core set of materials, a core set of strategies and communication, and take it to different countries and help them to introduce this breakthrough product into the market. And so, writing those materials, being responsible for that, and then
Hmm.
helping country teams to bring that product to market was an amazing experience. And I remember I went to a dental conference where this breakthrough technology was being introduced and communicated,
Hmm.
and I went to Singapore for that, and it was just an amazing experience to see this breakthrough technology come to life, to see the dental professionals, really say like they've never seen anything like this, and that I
Hmm.
was responsible for, for the materials, for the plans to make it as successful as possible in all Asian countries. I felt, big responsibility, but also, a lot of pride as I saw the product brought to market, and for it to be so successful. I
Hmm.
was, I was very pleased. I was deeply touched by it. It was an amazing experience because you don't necessarily have the opportunity to be a part of such a breakthrough,
Mm.
product launch. And so I felt very, 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 you know, very fortunate.
Yeah, and Tom's of Maine, the subsidiary of Colgate, what led to this promotion as like the CEO equivalent there?
Yeah, so been through those years of being abroad from Bangkok to Warsaw and realizing that I really wanted to run an entire business.
Hmm.
Somebody that I worked with, he was my manager in Asia. I would travel with him and the whole leadership team, and I said, if there ever is an opportunity anywhere in the world to run a business and be responsible for it more than marketing, I'd
Hmm.
really like that opportunity. So part of it was my networking internally with Colgate leaders to let
Mm.
them know that I wanted an opportunity like that. I realize, and I share a lot of this with folks when if I have a mentee and I'm trying to share some advice, you can't get promoted and you cannot take on a new opportunity unless you tell people that you're interested in that, right?
Yeah.
You have to have that courage, and you have to build those networks and those contacts inside a company and outside for people to know that that's what you want as a career ambition. So I was able to share that with several senior leaders, and when the opportunity came up to lead Tom's of Maine, that ex-manager, I'll always be grateful. He said, "How would you like to come back to the U.S. and run Tom's of Maine?" My jaw dropped. I think I fell off my chair. I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, this is what you wanted. And, here's the opportunity if you're willing to come back to the U.S., live in Maine." We live outside of Portland, Maine now, and that was,
Hmm.
10 years ago. How would you like to do that? It's exactly what I wanted to do, Ben. And so I feel like the progression from Colgate in the US to working in Colgate in several international locations, and then networking and sharing this is what my career ambition was. All of that is what really led me to get that opportunity to
Hmm.
run Tom's. There's different titles and things that companies have. So it was CEO equivalent because I was responsible for the entire Tom's the main company.
Yeah.
There's just, there's just different like levels and ways that people might have internal titles, but it really was a full company responsibility leadership role.
And what did that role of like full leadership, like responsibility of the company look like? What did some of like your responsibilities or day-to-day tasks look like?
Yeah, absolutely. One was I was responsible for, delivering sales goals and profitability goals that Colgate, the parent company, set for us. So, I could be a great person and very energetic, but not going to be successful if I'm not delivering the numbers with the team, right? So,
Yeah.
first and foremost is delivering financial goals. Secondly, was there was a big need, or part of driving growth in sales and profitability was to have Tom's of Maine sold in more places. So if it wasn't sold in every Target store, if it wasn't quite yet into other retailers, was to work with the sales team and get Tom's to go into more places. Introducing new products from the Tom's brand, right? Whether it be new toothpaste or new deodorants or new flavors of mouthwash or other things that were completely different. Developing new products and putting those into the market was also a big responsibility. Ad campaigns, so working with the marketing team and, supporting the marketing team at Tom's to develop new ad campaigns was really important. And then I think a big responsibility that you don't realize when you take on a broader leadership team, a broader leadership role like that, is actually people. So I probably should have started by saying I was responsible for a large organization of people, that they were doing the best that they can, that they were working together collaboratively, that they were getting the tools and resources that they need to do their job, that they were, I was having conversations with, teammates to see how they're doing in their job. If they said, I want to get promoted, okay, having that conversation to say, okay, you want to get promoted, here are some of the areas that you need to work on and develop further. Here are strengths that you have. And so managing a team and developing the team was a major responsibility. If there was dissatisfaction, if there were teammates who they had ideas, like it was really important that I listen and I develop the team. All the while, that's really the people, the team are going to be the folks that are developing the new products, and helping to deliver the financial goals. So I felt a lot of responsibility to make sure that the teams worked as effectively as they could, and then everything else followed from there.
Yeah, and as you started your career at Colgate, you kind of already mentioned some of the things that you learned, but what were some of the biggest takeaways that really helped you later on in your career at your time at Colgate and Tom's of Maine?
I think within Colgate, the experiences that I have, particularly having those international assignments, really drove me to stretch and broaden my mindset that there is a very large world beyond the U.S., where international business is not the same culturally, historically, business practices wise. And so really broadened my mind to become, more flexible, to be, adaptable, to understand that you need to understand others' perspectives, and you really need to appreciate that there are teammates that are very different from you. They were different from me, and to appreciate those differences and work with those differences for us to be an effective team. But I think it's not necessarily that I had to go abroad to have a broader and more open mindset, but certainly living and working abroad with Colgate, it was such a personal and professional transformative time. I think with Tom's of Maine, one thing, a major thing that I learned is I was going from being a marketing leader to now being a leader of an entire company. As I mentioned, being responsible for an entire company. And what that meant was I was not going to be an expert in everything. I had more experience in marketing and maybe sales, But that role taught me that I had to really lean on the people around me, lean on others who have expertise, who have knowledge, who have experience, because it's impossible for you to be a CEO and know every single part of the company, how it works, with the same level of expertise in every single function. I think it's, I'm going to say for me, it would have been impossible. And
Uh-huh.
so I had more comfort and familiarity with marketing and sales, but in the areas of, finance or manufacturing, I had to really listen to the experts around me and say, okay, teach me, help me understand this situation.
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend? Okay, I trust you. You've got that expertise. I don't. So go with it, go for it, and let
Mm-hmm.
me know if we need to, regroup or if we need to revisit a potential solution. But it really teaches you to delegate and lean on others versus earlier in career when I was just responsible for my work and my performance. Now it's here's a team that you can rely on, that you have to rely on, or you're not going to be a successful CEO or successful senior leader.
Yeah, and why did you decide to pivot from Colgate after almost 24 years to take on the CEO role at Tate's Bake Shop?
So, one, who doesn't love working with cookies? It's quite appealing, but it's part of it. But after well, almost a quarter of a century
Mm-hmm.
at Colgate, and having led Tom's of Maine, that experience really opened my eyes to say this is exactly the type of role that I'd like to have, that I wanted to work with other high growth, fast moving, fast growing brands and businesses. And
Mm-hmm.
so I did not see that opportunity within Colgate. Colgate has a lot of different brands and acquisitions that they made around the world, but particularly, beyond Tom's, there wasn't anything quite like it that I could move to be CEO. So, I've had such an amazing experience at Colgate, but if I was going to have that CEO role in a company that needed to scale, that had growth potential, with
Mm-hmm.
some of the experiences I had at Tom's, I decided it was a good moment to go and seek another CEO opportunity
Mm-hmm.
similar to Tom's, where they needed marketing and sales experience. They needed somebody with my expertise to help the company scale and grow.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really fortunate. I did a lot of meet and greets. You can
Mm-hmm.
imagine it's a little nerve wracking to leave a place that you've known your
Yeah.
whole life, right? 24 years was a long time. But and my husband encouraged me. He said, "If you love what you did at Tom's, go find the next Tom's." It was
Yeah.
a real pivotal moment, and so through my networking, I met someone who said, "You know what? I think the CEO of Tate's Bake Shop just departed.
Mm.
You'd be great for that role. Let me connect you to the people that are recruiting for that role." So it was really through networking, and it was not meeting with someone that I knew. It
Mm-hmm.
was a contact of a contact, and
Yeah.
I was fortunate to meet that person. She introduced me to folks that were recruiting for the opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
and I was so fortunate to get it. It was one of the most fun professional experiences of my entire life. All of
Yeah.
them were fun, but it was really fun.
Yeah. And in what ways was this role similar to your last CEO role, but also different?
So, in terms of similarities, so first and foremost, again, it is managing and ensuring that people in the
Mm-hmm.
company that they had the resources and they had, the tools that they needed to do their job the best that they can.
Mm-hmm.
So it's managing a large organization, seeing where we might need, to add some roles. Maybe we need to bring in some new people, and responsible for employees' satisfaction and, building a really vibrant, positive, family-oriented culture, if I can share that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Other similarities were, delivering financial goals by having really great marketing campaigns for Tate's, having a good sales strategy to be able to have Tate's go into other places. For example,
Mm-hmm.
Tate's wasn't in Costco. Tate's wasn't in every Target store. Tate's was not necessarily well shelved at CVS. It was not sold very much on Amazon. So if you think about Tate's going into all of these places, you get the sales growth, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they needed a leader that would be able to take, you know, bring experience to be able to do those things. And
Mm-hmm.
also new product development. Tate's had not really had very many new flavors or types of products coming to market. So that
Mm-hmm.
was another thing that I was responsible for. What's very different, I'd say, are two things. One, the employee base of Tate's was 95% Spanish speaking and
Mm-hmm.
95% female. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is where I brought out my Spanish, polished my Spanish speaking skills, and that's how I communicated with, with the team who they were making the cookies. So they were in the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very different way of managing. I think the other thing that was different is just the product itself. You know, when you're working with food versus toothpaste, there's things like food safety, making
Mm-hmm.
sure that you have the cleanest, right, plant and factory conditions. This is food that you're ingesting, so you have to be really extra careful
Mm-hmm.
of how the products are made. And so I had to learn really, what food safety meant, what regulatory conditions,
Mm-hmm.
how cookies are made, very different from toothpaste. So
Yeah.
I loved that I was learning a new category, but I was able to apply a lot of the CEO, skill set from Tom's to Tate's.
Yeah. And what was like your favorite project or initiative at Tate's that you led?
So a big one, and it's in the market, it's done well, is going beyond cookies. So we
Mm-hmm.
did introduce several new flavors. So you have chocolate chip, you have oatmeal raisin. We introduced a lemon cookie that's done extremely well. It's so different from a chocolate chip, and it
Yeah.
brought in new people into the Tate's brand. But a really fun one was cookie bark. So cookie bark is broken pieces of Tate's chocolate chip cookies with chocolate drizzled all over it, and then it's put into it's not in a bag, but it's put into a pouch, and
Yeah.
it's resealable, right? So it's like a shareable, resealable bag. And it
Mm-hmm.
was amazing because it was like a, cookie plus. It was a decadent treat. I mean,
Yeah.
cookies are a treat every day, but this had the chunks of chocolate,
Yeah.
melted chocolate all over it.
Yeah.
And it was fun. Well, one, it was a delicious product. And two,
Mm-hmm.
it was fun because it was something very different. It was a different form of product coming from Tate's, and it was incremental in the market, meaning it didn't go into a store and they replaced it with cookie flavor. It
Mm-hmm.
got extra shelf space, which drove extra sales.
Mm-hmm.
It was a deliciously fun project, and retailers really appreciated seeing something really, really new
Mm-hmm.
from the Tate's company.
Yeah, and I'm curious because I love Tate's cookies, and I was wondering what is like the process of making new flavors or like iterations, like the cookie bark.
What is it like to develop?
Yeah, like what is it like to develop and maybe like taste like the samples and see what's like the best formula?
I will say I was very popular in my household the years that I was at Tate's. Yeah, it was a lot of, you'd get a core recipe from, we have somebody, I won't say his name, but we called him the master baker.
Yeah.
So he was part of the original Tate's company. He worked with the founder
Mm-hmm.
decades ago in developing new recipes and flavors. And
Mm-hmm.
he, I would say, let's envision something in the citrus category, or let's envision something that is, very different from chocolate chip. And
Mm-hmm.
so he would kind of create a core recipe, and he would just start making different batches of cookies. And what I
Yeah.
would do is I would bring home unmarked bags. I didn't even tell my family what was in there. I just said,
Yeah.
these are cookie flavors, and I want you to take a Post-it and write down what you think it tastes like, what does it smell like, what is the flavor experience. So I will say it was different than sampling toothpaste where you're kind of taking a little dab. It was a collaborative and iterative process. We need a little bit more of this. It's too sweet. It doesn't taste like it has enough brown sugar. But we really worked with, the master baker was a Tate's employee, full-time employee,
Yeah.
and he just has like a eighth sense of, of if you said I want a we did salted caramel chocolate chip cookie, he'd be like, okay, I'm gonna go and figure that out, and he'd make, recipe A through E, and we would be tasting it. I will say the belt got a little tight in those 2 years I worked there, but yeah, we just tasted things and we had consumers taste them, and
Yeah.
then, we tried to put it in the market as quickly as possible. But it was Cookie bark was hard because we had never made anything like that before. And
Yeah.
you had to make sure the chocolate doesn't melt when it's traveling right from the plant to a store. Um, you had to make sure that it didn't, that it didn't go stale. So it was harder because it was really brand new. But the same thing, we had different recipes, tasted them, narrowed them down, and then put it into market. It was really fun, and it's
Yeah.
still in the market today.
Yeah. And what did your career journey look like from Tate's to Walden Local Meat Company? And what did your role there, or like what were some of the things that you did there, and what
Yeah.
did that look like?
Absolutely. So from Tate's, I did a short assignment as president of North America Ventures for
Hmm.
Mondelēz International. That's the parent company. As you mentioned, they make Oreo and Ritz. They own the Tate's brand. And I did a short assignment where I was responsible for kind of overseeing other companies other than Tate's. It was Tate's plus several other companies.
Mm.
That, the role was really interesting. However, I was, again, through network. I didn't see it on LinkedIn. I didn't see it on a company website. Through my network, somebody reached out and said, we have a really different opportunity
Hmm.
for you to work in a company that's much, much, much earlier stage, very early.
Yeah.
They needed a CEO that was going to help to grow and scale the Walden Local Meat Company. And so, through different conversations, I thought it'd be a really interesting professional experience. And it's a company and brand, the way that, they make their products is just extremely different, and it's healthier and better for you. And I love the healthy, better for you space. So I
Hmm.
took on that role, and there are a lot of similarities again in terms of being a CEO, being the leader, which is building the team, managing people, developing new products, and helping to develop a strategy for the business to grow. Just
Hmm.
such a different business model, and being a curious, ever continuing learner. I wanted to really try something very, very different. So
Yeah.
it was too appealing to pass up.
Yeah. And then why did you decide to exit as the CEO of Walden's Local Meat Company?
Yeah, I think different businesses go through different life cycles, and
Mm.
what I went to Walden Local to do, I was able to make happen, which was build a world-class team, build out stronger marketing capabilities, to be able to think about new products and think about how to sell meat beyond online, because it was a recurring revenue subscription business. So thinking about a strategy where you can sell more Walden local, but it wasn't necessarily going to be just through the website. So built a strategic plan, built out a team, built out amazing marketing capabilities, and I just had that moment, Ben, where I said, I think I can take my skill set and my experience and now apply it in different ways. I was really interested in board work,
Mm.
and I wanted to, go find a board opportunity, which is partly how I landed as board chair of Daily Crunch. I
Hmm.
joined them a little less than a year ago, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to take my experiences and leadership skills as well, and bring them to much, early stage
Hmm.
companies as a board member, not necessarily as CEO.
Yeah. And for like an overview of all your CEO positions, what are some key factors when making decisions as a CEO for these consumer packaged goods?
So you mean like key CEO
Yeah.
traits?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's no day is the same the day before the next day, but I think some really important traits as, a business owner or as a CEO is one, need to really be a good listener. People around you, whether it be your leadership team or other, teammates in the company, like people have really good ideas. People have experiences that you may not have experienced yet. And it's really important to listen actively because one, that's how I learned. And two, that's where good ideas, would come together and bubble up and made for just a much richer company experience. I think mentioning this, I mentioned this before, you have to leverage the team and the team's expertise around you. You cannot be an expert in everything. It's not efficient. It's not possible. So leverage the people around you. Um, Being decisive even when you don't have all the information that you may want to have to make a decision. Sometimes that moment of making a hard decision or even a less hard decision, sometimes that moment feels lonely. Like at the end of the day, you're responsible, but you can't waver. You have to be really decisive. And the two other things I'd say is you need to stay positive and be a real even-keeled source of strength, even in challenging times, right? If the team sees you like looking stressed or sounding stressed, what's the rest of the company gonna feel? They're gonna feel, wow, our leader, he or she or they do not look calm. There must be something really wrong, right? And even if even if you're facing a tough challenge or you don't have the answer for something yet or something's unexpected, you have to stay positive and just really be that that sense of calm for the team so that the team can focus, get their work done, help you think through solutions, and you just have to have that extra sense of, you may not feel peace, but you have to show that sense of peace. And the last thing I'd say is, as CEO, set the example. People are looking at you every day. You may not even think people are watching you. You may not feel it, but everyone's looking to you for inspiration, for advice, for guidance, for mentorship, and you have to set the example, right, of behavior, of upholding culture, of being decisive, being able to make mistakes and say, I made a mistake, and I'm going to tell you I made a mistake and that it's okay to make mistakes. These are just some areas and traits that I didn't wake up with decades ago, but that I've learned these are the things that are so important no matter what industry you're in, no matter what size company or organization that you're in. These tenets of leadership are so critical for your team to be successful, for the company or the organization to do well, and you set the tone, you set the example for others.
Yeah, and now we will move on to talk more about your current role as the president, board chair of Columbia College of Women, and also the board chair at Daily Crunch. So how do you split your time amongst these roles, and how often do your boards meet?
So interesting, great question. For president of Columbia College Women, so that is the official alumni organization for Columbia College, which is the undergraduate arm of Columbia University. And so it's a volunteer organization. All board members serve as volunteers. We are all alumni of the college. And officially and really our role, and my role is to, we are amplifying the voices of women and our allies. We are helping to champion and celebrate each other and to bring a sense of community across alumni around the world. So we have programs that are we'll put on programs that are they can be book talks, they might be something around mentorship. We've had guest speakers speak about leadership lessons. So we do programs. We do a lot of mentoring on our own. So I have mentees that are undergrads as well as alums. And that's, we serve alumni around the world as well as current students. We officially meet 4 times a year as a full board. We have a board of 25. But honestly, we also have a lot of meetings for, committees. If you're on the mentoring committee, your committee is meeting certainly more often than 4 times a year. And each committee meets as often as they feel they need. But I think because, I have a real passion for giving back, I put in, I'd say I commit a good amount of my time to Columbia College Women because I find, it is a time where community is so important and I want to be able to support others and bring people together in community. So with that, personal interest, I want to contribute a lot of my time. So I couldn't tell you the number of hours or what have you, but I have meetings every week or calls or mentoring sessions every week. Certainly more than an hour or two every week. In terms of Daily Crunch, so it is a fast-growing. It's not a startup, but it's a fast-growing, emerging brand of uniquely sprouted nuts, and they're doing amazing things. They're doing really well in the market. They just went national at Whole Foods. Their products are delicious and extremely healthy and nutritious. And because it's a company of 6 full-time employees, the board serves less as let's meet 4 times a year and just have a little bit of advisory. We serve as extended team members, right? I think of myself or my responsibility as a key thought partner to the CEO. She and I will, text and chat several times a week as needed. We meet 4 times a year as a full board, but we're always talking. I'm also trying to provide mentoring for the head of marketing, providing guidance to the head of sales. Again, with 6 full-time employees, this board is a working board. We roll up our sleeves, we provide ideas, we connect people to different resources, and it's really fun. But, I serve as first and foremost, as a thought partner to the CEO.
Yeah, and what is your favorite part of being a board member on both of these boards?
I think it's the thought partnership part. Thinking about talking through strategy, brainstorming, bringing ideas from my experience that the company could benefit from, and it's really the strategizing and just building and iterating on ideas. I think with many experiences that I've had professionally, I'm able to draw on different examples and say, you could consider trying this, or here's a contact in my network that could help you at least provide some initial guidance. I'm a connector and a collaborator, so I really like to bring people from other parts of my world to support, the Columbia College Women and to support Daily Crunch. But thought partnership and brainstorming is it's so fun. I mean, I just get a lot of energy out of that thought partnership and kind of consultative aspect of being on the board.
Yeah, and we will move on to the fourth part of the podcast, talking about challenges and overcoming obstacles as an Asian American. And because being an Asian American in leadership does come with its own sets of challenges, what were some of the challenges you faced in your industry, particularly maybe due to your background?
Yeah, I think that I will say there are more now, but certainly years back I did not see, and I don't know if I could pull out statistics, but I did not see around me Asian women in leadership roles. And I wouldn't say, that I thought about that every day, but I did notice it. And I did see more female leaders, Asian leaders, a few more as I lived in Asia, but not many. I did see women in leadership roles, but they weren't necessarily Asian. And I think consciously having heard, and this is even in career discussions, like let's say I'm talking about people on my team and we're doing a people development conversation, right? As a leadership team. It was really hard to hear, right? Like, oh, yeah, no, she so and so is really, really smart. She's she knows her numbers, she's analytical, kind of quiet though, and it's almost the Asians are quiet, I don't know if they're going to be in that, bold enough to be in that leadership role. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, you can't make that assumption, right? So I was determined, and, you can tell I'm certainly extremely extroverted. I'm known as the rolling ball of energy that never sleeps. But, truthfully, those comments or those assumptions made me realize you have to use your voice. You have got to speak up, even if it's uncomfortable, even what you're going to say might not be popular, and you might get adversity or someone might debate you, but you have to say it, right? So I felt as an female Asian leader, it was critical that I set the example, or I set the example for myself to say something, right? Always respectful, always with as much facts, it shouldn't be emotional and too subjective, but that I should use my voice. Not raise my voice in a negative way, but use my voice, because I didn't see that. And I didn't love, right, the fact that folks are like, oh yeah, so and so, so smart, so quiet. And I'm like, what are we doing to develop people? How can we develop that leader who we say is so smart and we think she has such great potential? Let's give her a mentor. Let's give her a peer buddy. Let's get her, a coach, or let's put her in a leadership program. Let's bring out the leader in her, not assume someone can't do it.
Yeah. And what role has your cultural background played in shaping your leadership style and perspective as a business leader, and how have you found ways to use it as a strength in your career?
I think it's exactly what we've been chatting about, which is recognizing that there are some cultural misnomers about being Asian, about being a woman, about being an Asian female, is really to use my voice and encourage others, right? If I know somebody has a good idea, but they seem, I'll hear in a mentoring session like, "Ooh, it's uncomfortable. I should have said something in that meeting." I will facilitate a way where that person does share their idea. Like I'll coach the person and say, "Okay, when we come back for that second part of the meeting tomorrow, please if I open the meeting and say, oh, there are a couple of additional great ideas here. We thought about it overnight, and there are a few other things that are really helpful for us to hear. Like if I tee that up for you, would you be comfortable to share it?" And generally someone is, right? They've thought about it. They've thought about how they can communicate something. But I feel that because I've seen or heard misnomers, that I feel it's my role in part to facilitate others to bring their voice out.
And for the last part of the podcast, where you talk about advice and inspiration, what is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
I would say a couple pieces. One is none of us can go it alone. A leader can only be an effective leader. I could only become and be an effective leader if I leaned on, trusted, and delegated to others. Another that's come up as in our conversation today is using the strengths of your teammates around you. You won't be an expert. Leverage the power and the impact and the knowledge of your teammates. Listen, then act. Take in lots of perspectives, but you need to be decisive. You can't let something, particularly if there's a challenge, you can't let it sit too long. So listen, get the input, and move. Delegation is key. There are, times in earlier parts of my career I tried to do everything myself, and it doesn't work, and the outcome or the quality of the recommendation isn't as robust because I didn't get the insights and the experience from others. And as we just talked about, use your voice. Somebody said, use your voice. You have great ideas. You have some really good solutions. No one's going to know unless you use your voice, let it be known, bring out your perspective. And I continue to practice that, even in moments where something may not be popular. And I try to coach and teach that. Bring out your voice so others can benefit, so things can move forward, and people get the benefit of, a leader's perspective. Elevate your voice.
Yeah, and mentorship can play a huge role in one's success. Did you have any key mentors or role models when you were coming up in your career? And if so, what was some of the advice that they gave to you that was quite significant?
I did. I had several of my mentors who I still connect with today, and I will say mentorship is a lifetime relationship, as long as it's a two-way relationship, and your mentor has the time to continue to mentor you. But several of my very inspiring mentors were ex-managers of mine, and a couple things. One manager said, "Be curious and learn from others. Get out of the very specific area of work that you are responsible for," right? So if I was in marketing, be curious. Go find out what the sales team is doing. Go talk to the finance team and learn how financials work. Go talk to the manufacturing team and see how toothpaste is made. You're going to learn a lot, but be curious and step out of your core functional expertise and step out of your comfort zone. I think another is act swiftly. My mentors have said you will not have all the answers and you're not going to be comfortable always, but you're going to have to move and act, as you get more senior in your career.
And how do you define success now, and how has that definition changed since the beginning of your career?
I think success, really has to do with setting very clear goals for yourself and for the organization that you are part of. Even if you're just, starting out early in career, it's really important to set clear goals and to continuously revisit those goals. If you're not performing up to the goal, then to assess why is that? What is happening? Do you need to, does one need to pivot and try something else? But I think clarity of role and clarity of what the goals are that you're trying to deliver against is really important.
Yeah.
I have a big one of good news often, bad news early. It's a mantra that I have of mine, which is good news, you should celebrate, you should make sure you thank people, you need to be very grateful when people deliver, right, great results, and you want to celebrate that. So good news often, like let's celebrate all the small, big, and medium-sized accomplishments. Bad news early. Do not hang on to bad news and try to solve it yourself. You need to get others involved, and then you have to move quickly. So I share that with others. And yeah, it's I think you carry those throughout your life. But I think my career really has been shaped by, the listening, the acting decisively, the using my voice, right, to bring out recommendations, using my voice to advocate and celebrate, and mentor others. And the other big one, and this has become ever important, probably in the last 10 plus years of my career, but important from the very first job, or the very first, cutting the lawn job as my son, well, he was shoveling snow in the winter time, so he was like 14, 15 at the time. Networking, building relationships, and really nurturing those contacts. Networking isn't let me meet you so you can give me a job. Networking is teach me what you know. Tell me how your industry or your work, how does that work? What does it take to be successful in your industry? That's the way that we grow in our mindset. And I think networking throughout our lives, throughout our careers, is going to serves people well. not networking later on in life, but from the very first, moments in career, and even as young students. But learn from others, build the network, and keep the network close. Keep the network active. Reach out. Let people know how you're doing. Let people know what questions you have.
Yeah.
I find folks are, more often than not, they're happy to share from their experience. You just have to be, comfortable, and you have to make the first move to ask for time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I've loved talking, and our conversation was so great. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben, for having me. I really appreciate it. Have a great week.